Hey everyone, today I'm going to do a video that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, which is the truth about Satan. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. Before I get started with this video, I want to encourage those who haven't watched one of my latest videos entitled Eternal Life is Not Like the Church Teaches to please watch that video first, then come back to this one. I'm going to add a link in the description below to the video, okay? So let's get started. Say you're playing a game with someone, maybe your spouse, maybe a sibling, or maybe your best friend. You play to win against your opponent, but it's just a game after all. Say you like to debate, and you debate to obviously win your side of the debate. It may be just for fun, or it may be serious. It's possible that your opponent brings up issues that either makes you think or makes you study harder to either confirm or change your own beliefs. What about people who train for the Olympics? These are people who are going to be competing against the best in the world, so they better be at the top of their game. The other athletes challenge them to reach deep into themselves and find excellence. So in these examples, the people you are competing with could be considered, in this context, your adversary, even if they are your best friend. Now, speaking of an adversary, Satan is not a name for the devil. In Hebrew, Satan simply means adversary, Satan or Satan, and Hasatan means the adversary. So let me ask, what if there were no opposing teams in the Olympics? What if there was just one team and everyone who participated won gold medals? Well, nobody would try very hard to win then, or to improve themselves, would they? An adversary can make you better yourself. They challenge you, they make you dig deeper to find more within yourself. Contrary to popular belief, study shows us that Hasatan in the Tanakh is a messenger created by Elohim for the purpose of refining his people. Now, none of the heavenly messengers or angels have free will of their own. They all do exactly as Elohim tells them. They are his servants. Now, I'm sure we agree that Elohim knows all, and he knows all that will happen down the road in the future as well. So are we supposed to believe, as the church teaches, that Elohim created a most beautiful angel called Satan that was made just a tiny bit lower than Elohim, and then this devilishly handsome angelic being deceived a third of all the other angels in heaven who sided with Satan against Elohim? Are we supposed to believe that? No, that's not how it happened. Elohim knew full well what would happen in the future. Okay, that didn't happen. When Elohim created mankind, he wanted a group of servants who do have free will, and he wanted them to choose to serve him. If he didn't give them the ability to choose, well, then he essentially made little robots who were always running around going, I love you, I will obey all your commands. That's not what he wanted. Now, if there was nothing put in place to tempt them and lure them away from him, how did Elohim give any balance to his test? He'd have to create something that is Hasatan to this group of people to find out who would return and obey all that he commanded and be his servants. It is literally a necessary evil and incorporated into the plan of our Creator. Let's examine the serpent tempting Eve in the garden. It's recorded in Genesis 3, 1-5. And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which Yahuwah Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, Is it true that Elohim has said, Do not eat of every tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, Do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, You shall certainly not die. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. All right, well, let's break this down. Let's take a look at that last verse for a minute. The last thing the serpent said. Was that a lie? Let's read that again. It's in Genesis 3:5, where it's recorded that the serpent said to Eve, "For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil." Well, after Adam and Eve sinned, it is written that Yahuwah said this in Genesis 3:22. "And Yahuwah Elohim said, See, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil." So no, there was no lie told by the serpent there. And now let's examine this verse in Genesis 3:4. "And the serpent said to the woman, You shall certainly not die." Was that a lie? Yahuwah told Adam in Genesis 2:17, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." Now Strong's definition is based on modern interpretation. The ancient Hebrew text says mot temut, or you will surely die. This means more or less eventually, or one day you're going to die. It's not immediate death, okay? This was the consequence of eating the fruit and sinning. Eventual death. Genesis 3:4, "And the serpent said to the woman, You shall certainly not die." The correct Hebrew text says the woman told the serpent, Tematun, or you must die. Eve got it wrong. Remember that Yahuwah told Adam mot temut, that implies you're going to die eventually. Tematun, or what Eve said, is more of an instant death, similar to a deadly poison, as if she would have eaten the fruit and immediately dropped dead. So what Eve said was not what Elohim had warned them. What the serpent said to her was correct. There was no lie there either, because they ate of it and they didn't drop dead immediately. That's what Eve said was going to happen, and that's not what happened. Continuing in Genesis 3:6-7, "And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat." Notice how she starts to look at this tree with new eyes, and she begins all of a sudden to desire this fruit. Eve didn't know Elohim's word well enough. She was tempted and disobeyed Elohim, which is sin. So the serpent became an adversary to Eve, tempting her away through her own free will from obedience to Yahuwah. And so began the real reason that Elohim created Hasatan, to test and find a select group of people who would desire to obey him over all the temptations in the world. The tree of knowledge and good and evil being the first example of this. Let me stop and ask something very important. If Elohim didn't want Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then why did he put that tree in the garden in the first place? Think about it. That's like saying when he put that tree there, he had absolutely no idea that they'd ever disobey him and eat from it. He told them to tend it. He told them to tend that tree. He knew what was going to happen. Now there was a different tree in the garden which they had to eat from, which was called the tree of life. But after their sin, Elohim booted them out of the garden so they couldn't continue to eat from that tree and live forever in their sin. And we're told that in Genesis 3:22-23. "And Yahuwah Elohim said, See, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil. And now lest he put out his hand and also take from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So Yahuwah Elohim sent him out of the Garden of Eden." Let's say you have a 3-year-old child. Would you lay a big candy bar right on your short coffee table and then turn to your child and say, "Now don't you eat that"? What do you think's going to happen? Eventually that kid's going to cave in and eat that candy bar. If you didn't want him eating it, you wouldn't have put it there on the coffee table. So let me ask, who was it who really started the temptation of mankind? Well, wait a minute. Am I suggesting that Elohim would tempt someone? Genesis 22:1, "And it came to be after these events that Elohim tempted Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am." Exodus 15:25, "Then he cried out to Yahuwah, and Yahuwah showed him a tree. And when he threw it into the waters were made sweet. There he made a law and a right ruling for them, and there he tried," or tempted, them. Now pay close attention to these next few. Deuteronomy 8:2, "And you shall remember that Yahuwah your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, to prove or tempt you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not." See the testing going on? Judges 3:4. And they were to try or tempt Israel by them to know whether they would obey the commands of Yahuwah, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moshe. Deuteronomy 13:1-3. When there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he shall give you a sign or wonder, and the sign or the wonder shall come true, of which he has spoken to you, saying, let us go after other mighty ones which you have not known, and serve them. Do not listen to the words of what that prophet or that dreamer of dreams is saying, for Yahuwah your Elohim is trying, testing, or tempting you to know whether you love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart and with all of your being. These are all from the same Hebrew word, nasah, which means to tempt, to try, to test. Do you see? This is Elohim testing his people to see who will obey him or not. And he has continued to test his people throughout human history, and we are still attempting to pass that test in his eyes. We will all occasionally fail. It is our turning and our repenting from sin that is Elohim's desire for his people. Ezekiel 18:21. But the wrong, if he turns from all his sin which he has done, and shall guard all my laws, and shall do right ruling and righteousness, he shall certainly live, he shall not die. 2 Chronicles 7:14. And my people, upon whom my name is called, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face, and turn from their evil ways. Then I shall hear from the heavens and forgive their sin and heal their land. For those who haven't seen my recent video on the subject of sin forgiveness entitled, Who Truly Forgives Man's Sin, please also watch that video because it's very important and it's pertinent to this where I'm at right now, okay? I'm going to add a link to that video below in the description with the other one. Speaking of a tree, let's look at pruning a tree. Now when you approach this little tiny fruit tree with pruning shears, I'm sure those pruning shears are like Hasatan to that little tree that has some ugly branches or dead branches or ones that are twisted in a bad way. But when you prune that tree correctly, it's going to grow better and it's going to produce much more fruit than if you wouldn't have pruned it at all. It's going to be much better off, right? So are we not to circumcise or prune our hearts of things that would defile us or separate us from Elohim? We cannot bear good fruit for Elohim with an uncircumcised heart. And Elohim is going to help us with that as well. Isaiah 48:10. See, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have chosen you in the furnace of affliction. Proverbs 3:12. For whom Yahuwah loves, he reproves, as a father the son in whom he delights. Elohim will chastise and refine those whom he loves. There is no better example of this than Job. I'm sure we've all heard Christians say, oh, that guy, he had the patience of Job. Well, have they ever actually read the book of Job? Job wasn't patient. Job was righteous. But it seems for a righteous man that he didn't choose a mate very well, and his children weren't any better. Job 1:1-5. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and straight, and one who feared Elohim and turned aside from evil. And 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. And his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and a very large body of servants, so that this man was the greatest of all people in the east. And his sons went and had a feast in the house of each on his day, and sent and invited their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And it came to be, when the days of feasting had gone round, that Job would send and gather them apart, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings, the number of them all. For Job said, it might be that my sons have sinned and cursed Elohim in their hearts. This Job always did. So we can see that Job was blessed, and he was very wealthy, extremely wealthy, but he lived in fear for his sons that they may curse Elohim or be unrighteous. So let's hear what happens next. Job 1:6-12. And the day came to be that the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yahuwah, and Satan also came among them. And Yahuwah said to Satan, from where do you come? And Satan answered Yahuwah and said, from diligently searching in the earth and from walking up and down in it. And Yahuwah said to Satan, Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a perfect and straight man, one who fears Elohim and turns aside from evil? And Satan answered Yahuwah and said, Is Job fearing Elohim for naught? Have you not made a hedge around him and around his household and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand, please, and strike all that he has, if he would not curse you to your face. And Yahuwah said to Satan, See, all that he has is in your hand, only do not lay a hand on himself. So the first thing we can notice, that if there was a devil in rebellion as the church portrays him, is he just going to waltz up to Elohim like nothing was wrong? Is he going to be allowed in the presence of Elohim in the first place? And is he also going to do exactly as Elohim instructed him to do if he's in rebellion? No. Secondly, if Job was so righteous and doing a great job, why did Elohim point him out on purpose to Satan? Say you had a good friend who was your neighbor. They lived right next to you, and they had a massive coin collection that they loved and they were very proud of, and it was very valuable. Would you casually mention that to a thief passing by if you really cared about your friend? No, you wouldn't do that. So something else must be going on here with Job. Elohim knew what Job was tormented with, an unrighteous family. So Job was really refined, he was tested, and he passed. He lost all of his possessions. He lost his entire family, all his children, his wife, his whole family. Then after this, Elohim allowed Hasatan to let him have a horrible skin condition, which caused him much pain, and he cursed his own birth and said it would be better if he had not even been born. But not once did he curse Elohim, even though he was prodded by his wife to do so, or did he lose his faith or become unrighteous. And in the end, this is written about Job. Job 42, 12-17. And Yahuwah blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. Now, if you're paying attention, that's exactly double of what he had before. He blessed him with twice of what he had. And he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first Yemima, and the name of the second Ketisa, and the name of the third Keren Hepek. I don't know if I pronounced those right. And in all the land were found no women so pretty as the daughters of Job. And their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his children and grandchildren for 4 generations. And Job died old and satisfied with days. Wow. Just by remaining righteous. Look at how blessed he was by Elohim, despite everything that Elohim allowed this Hasatan being to do, because it ended up refining him and blessing him more in the end, and that's very important. Okay, let's switch it up a little bit and hear about some different situations. Let's hear about Cain after his sacrifice to Elohim wasn't accepted when his brother Abel's was. Genesis 4, 6-7. And Yahuwah said to Cain, Why are you wroth? And why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Did Elohim say Satan was crouching by the door? Or did he say sin or disobedience was crouching by the door? Because that's really what this is about. Because something that's Hasatan to the word of Elohim or to you is going to cause you to disobey or sin. Also, why did Elohim spare Noah and his family, but destroy everyone else and everything that drew a breath on the earth with the flood? Genesis 6:5. And Yahuwah saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. If you read Genesis chapter 6, nowhere does it state that Hasatan had created so much evil that Elohim had to destroy the earth. Mankind itself was evil and had become Hasatan to the word of Elohim. It's easy for people to say today, well, the devil made me do it. That's easier for them to say than admitting that their heart was wicked or that they sinned. It was their choice, because these are all choices we're given. Devil didn't make you do anything. You're the one who decides. Also, who hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he wouldn't let the children of Israel go? Was it Hasatan who did that? Let's read Exodus 10:20. Yahuwah hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not let the children of Israel go. Nope, not Hasatan. That was done by Elohim, and many times as well. But why so many times? You know, when we read that story, it keeps happening over and over and over, that Yahuwah hardened Pharaoh's heart. And then once again, he wouldn't let the people go. And you're thinking, for crying out loud, is this guy an idiot? He's not the brightest bulb in the box if he just keeps just dealing with all these plagues. This tells us why. Deuteronomy 4:34-35. Or has Elohim tried to go and take for himself a nation from the midst of a nation by temptations and by signs and by wonders and by battle and by a strong hand and an outstretched arm and by great fearsome deeds, according to all that Yahuwah your Elohim did for you in Mitzrayim before your eyes? You have been shown it to know that Yahuwah himself is Elohim. There is no one besides him. That's why. It was all for the esteem of Elohim's name. Okay? Let me read something else here as we continue, but first let me set the stage for this next part of scripture I'm going to read. One of the wicked kings of Israel was King Ahab. He was wanting to do battle with Jehoshaphat against Ramoth Gilead. So all of Ahab's prophets told him that, yeah, you're going to go and you're going to do just fine. But there was one prophet, Micah, that told Ahab the truth, and Ahab would not win, and the following is why and what Micah saw. As we hear in 2 Chronicles 18:19-22. And Yahuwah said, who shall entice Ahab, sovereign of Israel, to go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said this, and another said that, and a spirit came forward and stood before Yahuwah and said, let me entice him. Yahuwah said to the spirit, in what way? And he said, I shall go out and be a spirit of falsehood in the mouth of all his prophets. And Elohim said, entice him and also prevail. Go out and do so. And now see, Yahuwah has put a spirit of falsehood in the mouth of these prophets of yours. This is Micah telling Ahab. And Yahuwah has spoken evil concerning you. Notice it doesn't say that Hasatan put falsehood in the mouths of these prophets that were under Ahab, the king of Israel, and their prophecies ended up getting Ahab killed in battle. This evil was from Elohim. Also, when King Shaul was angry with David, this is recorded in 1 Samuel 19:9. And an evil spirit from Yahuwah came upon Shaul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand. Because he was thinking he was going to run David through, but it didn't happen because David escaped. This wasn't an evil spirit like the devil that came over Shaul. This evil spirit was from Elohim. No devil in the picture. Isaiah 45:6-7. I am Yahuwah and there is none else, forming light and creating darkness, making peace and creating evil. I, Yahuwah, do all these. You know, this video would not be complete without me mentioning what is written in Ezekiel chapter 28, because if I don't bring it up, someone who doesn't understand this will bring it up and will call me out on it. So I'm going to beat him to the punch, and I'm going to read it to you, okay? I'm just going to read a portion from Ezekiel 28 that gets ripped out of context when people say, see, here Elohim is talking about Hasatan here. But if you don't believe me in what I'm about to say, go back 2 chapters to Ezekiel 26 and read how angry Elohim is with the land of Tyre and its king. Then continue on to chapter 27 and see exactly how blessed Tyre was, how it was like the richest nation on earth, and it made all the kings very wealthy. And keep reading then into chapter 28, and you will see to whom Elohim is referring to in these next verses that I'm going to read. Ezekiel 28:13-18. You were in Eden, the garden of Elohim. Every precious stone was your covering. The ruby, topaz, and diamond, beryl, shoam, and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald and gold. The workmanship of your settings and mountings was prepared for you on the day you were created. You were the anointed cherub that covered. And I placed you. You were on the set-apart mountain of Elohim. You walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. By the greatness of your trade, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. So I thrust you from the mountain of Elohim, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was lifted up because of your loveliness. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I threw you to the earth. I laid you before sovereigns to look at you. You profaned your set-apart places by your many crookednesses, by the unrighteousness of your trading. Therefore I brought forth fire from your midst. It has devoured you, and I turned you to ashes upon the earth before the eyes of all who see you. So we need to understand who Elohim is speaking about here. Okay, now there was a couple hints in there where it talked about the unrighteousness of your trading. Remember, Tyre was very, very wealthy. And remember how Elohim said he loves a balanced scale, and an unbalanced scale is an abomination to him? So that's two clues right there. But in the verse right before those verses, literally the verse right before I started, this is written in Ezekiel 28:12. Son of man, so he's speaking to Ezekiel here, take up lamentations for the king of Tyre, and you shall say to him, thus says the Master Yahuwah, you were sealing up a pattern, complete in wisdom and perfect in loveliness. And then we go right into, you were in Eden in the garden of Elohim, every precious stone was your covering. Okay? That chapter of Ezekiel starts out with these two verses. Ezekiel 28, 1-2. And the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, thus says the Master Yahuwah, because your heart is lifted up, and you say, I am El. I sit in the seat of Elohim in the heart of the seas, whereas you are a man and not El, though you set your heart as the heart of Elohim. So we can see how high and mighty this guy thought he was. Well, every time that happens, what happens? Elohim brings these people down low. What about Nebuchadnezzar when he walked around his palace saying, look what I have created for my splendor? What happened then? He heard a voice from the heavens where Elohim said, your kingdom has been taken from you. Just like that. Now for people who don't agree with me and what I just read, let's look a little closer at a few of those statements that Elohim made a few verses later in Ezekiel chapter 28. Notice that all of these statements are past tense. Okay? So I thrust you from the mountain of Elohim, and I destroyed you. I brought forth fire from your midst. It has devoured you. I turned you to ashes upon the earth before the eyes of all who see you. Plain to see that this chapter is not describing the devil. Because you'll see when you back up into Ezekiel chapter 26 and 27. Hopefully you're going to read this and you're going to understand, because you're going to read about all the eyes of all the kingdoms that traded with Tyre and how they saw it was destroyed. And they were very sad. So I turn you to ashes upon the earth before the eyes of all who see you. Okay, this isn't talking about Satan. And you'll see that, I hope, if you read it in context. We always get in trouble when we rip things out of context because we don't understand what we're talking about sometimes, okay? Now, I know at some point during this video that some people are going to be saying, Lucifer is the devil. First of all, Lucifer is not the devil's name, just as Satan isn't either. The King James Bible has the word Lucifer in only a single place. It's in Isaiah 14:12. Let's read it from the King James. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? The ISR Scriptures has that verse translated like this. Isaiah 14:12. How you have fallen from the heavens, O Hallel, son of the morning. You have been cut down to the ground, you who laid low the Gentiles. The word Hallel in Hebrew is known as the morning star. That's the planet Venus, which is easily seen in the sky in the east just before sunrise. Lucifer, also known as the bright or shining one, is also a name of the planet Venus. So Hallel and Venus, Lucifer, not Hasatan or the devil. They get Lucifer from two Latin words that are put together, lux, fur. Lux meaning light and fur meaning to carry. Isaiah chapter 14 isn't even talking about Satan or the devil. It's referring to the king of Babylon. If one reads it in context, it's easy to see. Isaiah 14:4, that you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel, the king of Babylon, and say, how the oppressor has ceased and the gold gatherer ceased. Isaiah 14:22, and I shall rise up against them, declares Yahuwah of hosts, and I shall cut off from Babylon the name and the remnant, and offspring and descendant, declares Yahuwah. And this next verse is talking about the death of a human being, not an evil being. Isaiah 14:11. Your arrogance has been brought down to the grave, and the sound of your stringed instruments. The maggot is spread under you, and worms cover you. Now that's pretty descriptive, but maggots and worms help decompose earthly bodies, not devils or evil beings. Now, the New Testament has demons being cast out of everybody and his brother, it seems like, yet we don't find this or any instruction on how to do so in the Torah or all of Tanakh. Don't you think that's a bit odd? In the ancient world, the pagans had many different gods. Some were good gods, and some were evil ones, and some were higher, and some were lower, all in between. Now, the New Testament seems to make this devil just a little bit lower than Elohim, but still an evil god in rebellion and who has free will to lead a bunch of his minions called demons around to do his dirty work. But in Hebrew, there's no word for demon. Isn't that a little odd as well? Do you know there is zero instruction in Torah about dealing with Satan? Elohim never gave any such instruction as what to do if you are tempted by Satan. Nothing. He didn't give any instruction on what to do if you're possessed by a demon either. Isn't that weird? Nothing. With as much of a scary devil figure this New Testament makes Satan out to be, don't you find that to be very odd? The Tanakh says that the earth is Elohim's footstool and that he is in charge. The New Testament says that Satan or Satan is the prince of this world. Well, that's strange. The Christian mindset is that Satan is trying to drag as many people into hell with him as he can to burn for all eternity. Since we know that this eternal torment or fiery hell place is nothing but more pagan nonsense and fiction, we know that that's not the case either. The more we dig and the more we search, it becomes clear and more evident to us that Christianity is just paganism with a new name slapped on it, and their handbook has been compiled and rewritten into something called the New Testament. So we see that Elohim put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden for a reason. He hardened people's hearts, tempts people, gave people evil spirits, and that he creates evil as well, because he told us. These are all characteristics that most people today would most likely attribute to the devil. That's because they don't understand what Hasatan means or what it does or what it's there for. Their minds are so full of pagan ideas that were adopted by religion that they cannot tell the truth from fairy tales. Even when you tell them, they don't even want to hear about it because they're so into their fairy tale religion things that they've dragged with them out of Christianity or out of religion, and they're still in, that they can't see it because truth can't get through. And they certainly do not understand Elohim, especially when he tests us in ways that they say are the devil's work, by using the tool that he created, Hasatan. That's the tool that he created to refine his people. Well, I hope this video blessed you, and I hope it answered a lot of questions that people have been asking me for quite a long time. Shalom to all who are dispersed worldwide in the family of Yisrael. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.